Do you want to get photos that look like this? If so, I'm going to show you how in this video. I'm going to go over the planning process, tips to get better looking images, and also show you how I edit my photos as well. First, I'd like to start off with the planning process. I like to plan my shots for numerous reasons. Some of them include not wasting time. So if you plan what you're going to do, you're not going to waste a lot of time to look out for perfect spots, not waste time looking where to take off from, where to land, getting prior permissions, etc. So why I talk about planning is it really helps you get even better looking images. When you planning also saves battery. So once you're done getting the shots that you want, you have a little bit extra juice to fly around, get some more. Now, when I come across a location that I find is interesting, what I'll do is I'll go into Google Maps and, look around for any obstacles as well. I also use apps that allow me to view the angle of the sun, where the shadows are going to be of certain objects. It really helps when you're trying to frame your shot. Also, go onto Instagram and search for photos in that location and use it for inspiration and plan the type of shots that you want to get. So while planning, also try to include different angles you want to shoot it from and different heights that you want to shoot it from as well. Make sure you plan properly before heading out to your location to grab those photos. It takes just a little bit of time to do some research, but it's worth it. Now, when it comes to photo settings, shoot in RAW. A lot of you might know this and a lot of you might not know this if the Mini 4 Pro is your first drone. RAW captures much more information compared to JPEGs. That's why the file sizes are much larger compared to JPEGs. This also gives you a lot more flexibility to edit your photos in apps such as Lightroom. JPEG photos already has a lot baked in, so you don't have much room to edit. Now, when it comes to editing, I'm sure your favorite photographers have their own tutorials or master classes that you can follow and, try to do it their way or learn their techniques. The next thing is the aspect ratio. Now, the Mini 4 Pro can shoot in 4:3 and 16:9. Now, why shoot in 4:3 is because it's utilizing the whole sensor compared to 16:9, which is cropping in and giving you that full view. So I recommend shooting in 4:3 and then cropping into whatever aspect ratio you require, whether it's 4:5 Instagram or 16:9 or 9:16. Now, the Mini 4 Pro can shoot in 48 megapixels. However, it's not true 48 megapixels. It's actually a 12 megapixel camera and it uses a quad Bayer sensor, so 12:4, 48. Now, the only time that you would need to shoot 48 megapixels is when you're gonna crop in quite a significant amount. So megapixels just gives you more resolution, doesn't necessarily make your photos pop or look better. Most of the times I shoot in 12 megapixels on the Mini 4 Pro and previously on the Mini 3 Pro, and my photos turned out fine. However, there are times where I have shot in 12 megapixels and I wanted to crop in a significant amount. Now, apps such as Lightroom allow you to enhance your photos, which adds more resolution, so you can crop in quite a bit. So in case you ever shoot in 12 megapixels and you wanted to crop in, you can always use that option in apps such as Lightroom. And quite often while shooting photos with the Mini 4 Pro, I do use a CPL or an ND-PL filter. And the polarizer filters help reduce the amount of glare and cut out that reflection. It also adds more color and contrast. I'm not saying you have to use them, but it's pretty useful. And if you want to get long exposure photos in the day, you have to use ND filters and really dark ones in order to increase your shutter speed to like 1 second or 2 seconds. I do use ND filters, polarizer filters in varying situations. Now, because the Mini 4 Pro has a fixed aperture, and if I want to make certain changes, I have to put on an ND filter in order to reduce the shutter speed down and not overexpose the image. There's a lot of tutorial videos on ND filters, polarizer filters, so check them out as well. I have some and I'll link it in the description below too. Now, there might be situations where you want to use HDR photos. Now, I'm going to work on a separate video for that. I'm not going to put it all here. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on future videos. And I'll also be working on a separate video on doing panorama photos. Now, I recommend shooting panoramas. I do them most of the time because sometimes I feel like I wish I had more in the image than just taking that one single shot, whether it's in vertical or in landscape orientation. And when you have some time, just learn a little bit about the basics of photography and certain tips when it comes to lighting in composition. Let me just give you a quick summary about the exposure triangle, which is the aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. The aperture controls how much light enters your camera. It also has to do with the blur in the background. So if your aperture was set at f2.8, you'll have a pretty blurry background, and you'll also have a lot of light coming in compared to, let's say, f11, where the background won't be as blurry and you have less amount of light coming in. For example, this video right now is being filmed using an aperture of f2.8. Shutter speeds vary according to the situation. Now, if you're in broad daylight and you want to take a photo, your shutter speed generally is going to be pretty high unless you're using ND filters and close down your aperture to allow less amount of light coming in. And that way the shutter speed will be slower because it'll take longer to capture the photo to allow more light. So if you want a long exposure, you're going to want to set your shutter speed at around 1 second or more. And if you want a sharp, quick photo, then setting a shutter speed of about 1/500 is perfect. Like I said, depending on what you want and on the situation, your shutter speed is going to vary. Now, ISO has to do with light sensitivity. Most of the times I leave it at 100. However, there are times in low light situations where I do bump up the ISO to about 400, 800. Now, the higher you bump up your ISO, the more noise you're going to introduce in your image. Now, something I recommend when you're out shooting photos is to use the burst mode. And this is because the Mini 4 Pro is a tiny drone and can be pushed around by the wind quite a bit. So sometimes if you're shooting at slower shutter speeds, there might be a blur in your image because the drone moved, and you don't want to come home and find an image that is not usable. It's just gonna really annoy you. I know it's annoyed me quite a few times. So I recommend shooting in burst mode of about 3 to 5 photos. That way you have more of the same image in case the drone was pushed around and you have a blurry image. Like I mentioned in the planning process as well, try to get some extra shots in from different angles. Don't just get that 1 or 2 shots. Try to look at it from different views just in case you find another perspective that is much better. Use the guidelines to compose your shot. Learn about the rule of thirds. If you have any additional tips that you want to leave for other viewers, please mention them in the comments below. And if there's any particular videos that you'd want to watch from the Mini 4 Pro or any other drone, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you enjoyed it, if you found it helpful at all, I really appreciate you hitting that like button, and also subscribe so you don't miss future videos. I'll be sure to see you in the next one.